I think the first thing that's distinctive is his combination of encounter with mercy, which is kind of a key to his pontificate. He talks about encounter being a craftsmanship of mercy, and I think it's a wonderful phrase. Now, mercy for him is kind of eager openness to the other, and the way he expresses it is with looking at the parable of the prodigal son and seeing that the father runs out to meet the son with his arms wide open to embrace him, and that it seems to me is what he thinks of as mercy, and I really think that that catches the sense of he will do, and as I might say later on, I think he's demonstrated that in his willingness to go to far off places with far off people to do his pastoral visits rather than just with Catholic peoples and Catholic countries. It means a ready openness to others. It seems that also kind of is sensitive to the differences. I think of one really critical experience. It's not the only one, but I was in the Catholic-Jewish dialogue, both the dialogue with the Reform and the dialogue with the Orthodox for 24 years. And when the film The Passion of the Christ came up, there was a great deal of controversy about it. And at our meeting that year, Cardinal Keeler, who was the chair and a great friend of the Jewish community, he professed to have been moved by the movie. And even the most ironic of the Jewish rabbis objected, saying this was really a film very hostile to Jews and so on. So he went back with his rabbi friends and saw it again and came back with a different attitude. And it occurred to me that when you're doing this kind of dialogue, that it's important that you have to not just reason with people, you have to feel with them, and that, when you feel their pain, and the Pope says this frequently about feeling the suffering of other people as part of encounter, then you can more closely enter into union. And so that the interreligious dialogue itself means that you are able to not just talk ideas, but feel what people feel, and thereby begin to change your attitudes and consequently your ideas. The environmental work, and then later the anti-nuclear work, I've developed friends who, for lack of a better word, are religious seekers, but very profound religious seekers. They're not just people who are going to go out and sample this, that, and the other thing, and casual. They really are disciplined religious seekers, and they feel comfortable in different kind of religious settings, and they talk about the translatableness of metaphors, religious language of each tradition being a set of metaphors. And they've taught me, I think, that each of these traditions can open to different realms of experience through the metaphor. And we need to really explore the metaphorical value of the other traditions when we're engaged in them. And they're very different people, but they're both very powerful religious personalities because of that kind of gift. So that's another experience I've had of breakthrough in this area. We also, in the environmental field, we had a wonderful project called the Religious Partnership for the Environment, which brought together the National Council of Churches, ourselves, the Evangelical Environmental Network, which is a coalition of about 700 evangelical churches, and some Jewish activists in the Jewish Coalition on Judaism and environmental life. In any case, in that particular project, there were projects where to some extent I would get very annoyed because our partners, some of our partners would always violate our commitments, our prior commitments, and carry their own agenda. But then I learned that, really, it was the same agenda, that in a sense, they brought to meetings people who had been trained in programs that the Catholic Campaign for Human Development had developed, which gave rise to environmental projects around the country. I also found that in that dialogue, things that I thought really weren't environmental turned out to be very environmental. For instance, dealing with sprawl, because our small grants project had given rise to a series of projects around the Great Lakes that dealt with aspects of sprawl and really were recognized around that whole region and internationally as contributing to environmental justice. And I have to say, what that taught me was you have to be ready for surprises all the time. And one of the things that I've learned is that your readiness to meet with people and be open to meeting with various people really contributes to that kind of thing. I think Francis kind of exhibits that, especially in his trips to countries that aren't Christian. I mean, he's kind of done more of that than previous popes, meeting with Muslims in Muslim countries, as in Iraq or in the Emirates, or in Buddhist countries like Myanmar, to embrace the other, or in Mali, where he really was risking his life, or Central African Republic rather, but he really risked his life. So I think the willingness to risk and be surprised is really part of what you need to have in these cooperative enterprises. My experience is that these engagements give rise to all sorts of networks, and that that readiness to meet with people and then having met with them, be open to them, even surprised by them, is important. I think what the Holy See has done with its 7-year program on Laudato Si is a very ambitious program for doing this with respect to the environment. We did a very extensive program with the bishops' conferences, and our small grants program was uniquely successful. It was used by a lot of parishes and dioceses, but then regional bishops' conferences even took it up. And one of the more famous kinds of projects was I used the small grants money to fund the Columbia River Project, which is a multi-year project of several American states in the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and the province of British Columbia in Canada, to produce a pastoral letter on the ecosystem, which they were all equally joined. I think that that willingness to be surprised is also very important, and to take risks. For instance, with the Holy Father's engagement with China, where I think among experts there's the most doubt and question and criticism. I think there is a certain amount of respect there that comes from the Jesuit tradition of having gone into China in the 17th century and been receptive to Chinese culture the way no other Westerners were, and that still holds on. And so he's respected for that reason, but he's also willing to risk a kind of joint working. And I think it's a very fraught kind of relationship, but one nonetheless that I think is where that kind of willingness to risk and be surprised is really very important. In the environmental area, and rather in the nuclear area, let me say, I'm so involved in different networks that it's hard to kind of distinguish, but it's one network leads to another. So I work with the Holy See in 2 or 3 different capacities on nuclear weapons. And as a result of that, I've been involved with another project called Global Priorities, which is trying to bring Catholic authorities and Russian nuclear negotiators together. I've also involved with kind of proteges of the late Secretary of State George Shultz, who are veteran disarmament people trying to advance the cause of nuclear abolition in their work. And I find that the connections become almost hard to rein in, because the people are always inviting you to be part of things. And so I think the willingness to meet, to share, and to engage in exchanges of various kinds, whether they're Zoom meetings or exchange of ideas on the internet, can be very, very, very fruitful. And I think our nuclear projects at the Vatican are bearing a lot of fruit. And I think our Berkley Center webinars on them, and we'll have a few this coming spring, I hope. They will also, I think, bear fruit. One of the things that we're proudest of is with Catholic University and Notre Dame and Fordham, we have an initiative to re-engage the Catholic community in nuclear disarmament. And one of the outcomes of that is a student seminar, which for a couple of years met in the summers here in Washington. But now, since the pandemic has been meeting online, we didn't have a seminar online this January, but we are having monthly meetings. And we're building on that with our Georgetown students doing a presentation coming up on the U.S. Nuclear Posture Review on projected issues if it's not out by the time their event gets scheduled, or on the posture review itself if it is released in time. So I'd say I just found that connections lead to connections, and this is a very, very connected world.